In the chaotic dance of existence, where every moment vies for our attention, we find ourselves besieged by distractions and time thieves. In our modern world, where the pace is relentless and the demands incessant, it is all too easy to lose sight of our purpose, to squander our time on trivialities, and to be swept away by the tempest of emotions. Yet, in the annals of history, there exists a beacon of wisdom that offers solace and guidance amidst the tumult, Stoicism. Born in the crucible of ancient Greece, refined through the trials of Rome, Stoicism is more than a philosophy, it is a way of life, a steadfast anchor in the stormy seas of existence. As adherents of Stoicism, we recognize that the true measure of our worth lies not in the accumulation of wealth or power, but in the mastery of ourselves. We understand that our time on this earth is finite and precious, and that every moment squandered is a moment lost forever. We embrace the teachings of Epictetus, Marcus Aurelius, and Seneca, drawing strength from their words to navigate the labyrinth of distractions that beset us. At the heart of Stoicism lies the concept of the dichotomy of control, the understanding that there are things within our power and things beyond it. This fundamental principle serves as our guiding star, illuminating the path to inner peace and resilience. When confronted with distractions and time thieves, we remind ourselves that our thoughts and actions are within our control, while external events are beyond our influence. Consider the tale of Epictetus, the former slave who rose to become one of Stoicism's greatest champions. Despite enduring unimaginable hardship and adversity, Epictetus remained steadfast in his pursuit of virtue. In his seminal work, the *Enchiridion*, he implores us to focus our energies on that which is within our control, rather than wasting them on futile endeavors. We cannot choose our external circumstances, but we can always choose how we respond to them, Epictetus reminds us. The mind is its own place, and in itself can make a heaven of hell, a hell of heaven. In the face of distractions, we follow Epictetus's example, cultivating a stoic indifference to that which lies beyond our control. We do not allow ourselves to be swayed by the whims of fate or the caprices of fortune. Instead, we anchor ourselves in the present moment, directing our attention to that which truly matters. But Stoicism is more than mere resignation or passivity, it is a call to action, a summons to live with purpose and intention. As disciples of Marcus Aurelius, we embrace the concept of amor fati, the love of fate. We recognize that every obstacle is an opportunity, every setback a chance for growth. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher emperor, faced countless trials during his reign, yet he remained resolute in his commitment to virtue. In his *Meditations*, he reflects on the transient nature of existence, urging us to seize the present moment and live with integrity. Waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be, Marcus admonishes us. Be one. In the pursuit of our goals, we encounter myriad distractions, temptations that lure us from the path of righteousness. But as Stoics, we are not swayed by the siren song of instant gratification. We recognize that true fulfillment comes not from the pursuit of pleasure, but from the cultivation of virtue. Consider the story of Seneca, the statesman and philosopher who served as advisor to the Emperor Nero. Despite the corrupting influence of power and wealth, Seneca remained true to his principles, advocating for a life of temperance and moderation. In his letters to Lucilius, Seneca expounds upon the virtues of self-discipline and self-mastery. He reminds us that true freedom lies not in the absence of constraints, but in the ability to govern ourselves. It is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more, that is poor, Seneca writes. Wealth consists not in having great possessions, but in having few wants. In the face of distractions and time thieves, we channel Seneca's wisdom, embracing the austerity of the Stoic lifestyle. We eschew the trappings of material wealth and societal acclaim, choosing instead to find solace in the tranquility of our own minds. But Stoicism is not a solitary endeavor, it is a communal pursuit, a shared journey towards enlightenment and self-realization. As members of the Stoic Brotherhood, we draw strength from one another, offering support and encouragement in times of trial. Consider the tale of Zeno of Citium, the founder of Stoicism, who gathered disciples around him in the painted porch, Stoics of Athens. Together, they engaged in philosophical discourse, debating the nature of the good life and the path to eudaimonia. In the modern world, we may not have the luxury of congregating in a physical space, but we are bound together by the bonds of fellowship and shared purpose. Through online forums, social media, and local meetups, we connect with like-minded individuals, united in our commitment to Stoic principles. In times of crisis, we lean on our fellow Stoics for support, drawing strength from their wisdom and fortitude. Together, we weather the storm, emerging stronger and more resilient than before. In conclusion, Stoicism offers us a roadmap for navigating the tumultuous waters of existence. Through the practice of self-discipline, resilience, and community, we can overcome distractions and reclaim our time. Let us heed the words of the ancient Stoics, and embrace the path to inner peace and fulfillment. As Marcus Aurelius reminds us, the happiness of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts, and therefore, guard accordingly, and take care that you entertain no notions unsuitable to virtue and reasonable nature. In the cacophony of modern existence, where distractions assail us from every angle, and time seems to slip through our fingers like sand, the ancient wisdom of Stoicism offers a beacon of clarity and resilience. Rooted in the teachings of illustrious philosophers like Epictetus, Seneca, and Marcus Aurelius, Stoicism provides us with a profound framework for navigating the tumult of life with grace and fortitude. Chapter 1: The Nature of Distractions. In the labyrinth of existence, distractions lurk at every turn, beckoning us away from our true path. Yet, as Stoic philosophers remind us, the nature of distractions lies not in the external world but within our own minds. Epictetus, the former slave-turned-philosopher, teaches us that it is not events themselves that disturb us, but our judgments about them. Consider the story of Marcus Aurelius, the revered Roman emperor and Stoic sage. Amidst the clamor of his imperial duties, Marcus found solace in the sanctuary of his own mind. Through the practice of Stoic principles, he learned to cultivate an inner citadel impervious to the onslaught of distractions. Like Marcus, we too can harness the power of our thoughts to transcend the siren call of external stimuli. Chapter 2: The Tyranny of Time Theft. Time, the most precious of commodities, is often squandered in the pursuit of fleeting pleasures and trivial pursuits. Seneca, the eminent Stoic philosopher, admonishes us to guard our time with the utmost vigilance, for once it is lost, it can never be reclaimed. Yet, in our modern age of instant gratification and incessant business, time theft has become an epidemic of epidemic proportions. Imagine the scene, our bustling marketplace teeming with merchants hawking their wares, and throngs of people jostling for space. In the midst of this chaos, stands the Stoic sage, serene and unruffled by the pandemonium around him. He understands that time is the only true wealth, and he guards it with the zeal of a sentinel guarding his post. Chapter 3: Stoic Strategies for Resilience. In the face of distractions and time theft, Stoicism offers us a panoply of strategies for cultivating resilience and fortitude. At the heart of Stoic philosophy lies the concept of the dichotomy of control, as elucidated by Epictetus. According to this principle, we must learn to distinguish between that which is within our control and that which lies beyond it. By focusing our energies on what we can control, our thoughts, actions, and attitudes, we can navigate life's vicissitudes with equanimity and grace. Consider the example of a ship tossed upon the storm-tossed seas. Like the Stoic sailor who adjusts his sails to the whims of the wind, we too can adapt to the ever-changing currents of life. By cultivating a mindset of acceptance and resilience, we can weather even the most tempestuous of storms. Chapter 4: The Practice of Mindfulness. Central to the Stoic approach to handling distractions and time theft is the practice of mindfulness. Mindfulness, as Seneca teaches us, is the art of living in the present moment, free from the shackles of past regrets and future anxieties. By anchoring ourselves in the here and now, we can transcend the ephemeral distractions that assail us and reclaim our time as our own. Imagine a garden ablaze with the colors of 1,000 flowers, each one vying for our attention. Yet amidst this riot of beauty, the Stoic gardener remains focused and attentive, tending to each blossom with care and intentionality. In the same way, we too can cultivate a garden of the mind, bringing away the distractions that threaten to choke our growth and savoring the beauty of the present moment. Chapter 5: A Conclusion. In the crucible of life, where distractions assail us from every angle and time slips through our fingers like sand, Stoicism offers us a beacon of clarity and resilience. Through the teachings of Epictetus, Seneca, Marcus Aurelius, and other Stoic sages, we can learn to transcend the tumult of existence and reclaim our time as our own. As we journey through the labyrinth of life, let us heed the wisdom of the Stoics and cultivate an inner citadel impervious to the distractions that threaten to derail us. Let us guard our time with the zeal of a sentinel guarding his post and embrace the practice of mindfulness as a means of reclaiming our time as our own. In the words of Marcus Aurelius, waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be. Be one. Let us strive to embody the virtues of courage, wisdom, and resilience in our daily lives, and in so doing, reclaim our time and our destiny. Farewell, fellow travelers, and may the wisdom of the Stoics guide you on your journey towards inner peace and fulfillment.